So thank you for joining me for this first episode of this series here on the Jobber Radio channel. This is going to be called Memories to Matches. Now, the idea is I have very fond memories of certain matches in wrestling history throughout my time of watching, so I'm going to rewatch them and see if they still held up, if they're still as... Yeah, let's spin the shit. Didn't really spin that well. And see if they held up as much as my memory of them, you know, basically... what I've remembered. But let's go ahead and let's start with the very first thing here. Edge versus Test to unify the United States and Intercontinental Championships. Now, Edge was the United States champion, which was a WCW ECW Alliance title, versus Test, who was the Intercontinental champion, which of course is a WWF title. And this was the show Survivor Series 2001, where basically they dropped the Alliance versus WWF angle dead. Like, this is it. I remember the original plan I remember reading was they were trying to take it to WrestleMania. It was drawing really bad. Their crowds were dying. I mean, just ratings were low. Everything was going terrible. So they cut it, and that was it. This was the final show. Now, throughout the whole Alliance versus WWF thing, I think there's two matches that I really liked. The other one will be on this as well, but I'm not going to give away what it was. It's not what you would expect either. Edge versus Test, I think, is my favorite. I think that this is my favorite thing to come out of the entire horrible, botched, boring Alliance versus WWF angle. I've talked about it in the past, but they really dropped the ball on it. Now, Edge versus Test, the idea here was that whoever wins gets to unify the titles and keeps a job no matter who wins at the end of the night. Obviously, the WWF won, so, you know, he basically... Edge was safe no matter what, but in storyline purposes, he saved his job by being both United States champion and Intercontinental champion. So the next night on Raw, the United States title dissolved and the IC title remained. This match was something that I remember at the time being kind of blown away at, because if you look at the history of the WWF and Alliance stuff, none of the matches are really spectacular. I know there's a few in there that are okay or pretty good, but I felt like this was one. This made me care about Test. Now, I already liked Test. I thought he was cool. I always thought he was like a smaller Kevin Nash. But this match made me actually think Test might be a good wrestler, which I never really thought up until this point. And also, this is kind of Edge's coming out party, because Edge was always a really fun guy. Edge was always a decent wrestler, but this is the first time where I saw like an inkling of what he could become in the future. You know, later on with his matches with Kurt Angle and stuff, Lance Storm. Then you have some like pushing it. I think his stuff with Angle is probably what made him into a main event guy level. But this made him into a upper mid-card guy, like solidified in my opinion, and it was awesome. So some notes from this match. I loved that even though Edge is usually a big guy in matches, because Edge is pretty damn tall in real life, Test is obviously larger, so they did do the small man versus large man thing. It was interesting that they had a lot of really good counters. Both these guys had a decent amount of moves. I'd say Edge obviously had a lot more, but it was nice to see Edge be able to play off of somebody who he could actually counter moves with. One bad thing, well, it's actually two bad things. Test was really loud. Test was the one calling this match, which I think is kind of surprising, because at this point, I think Edge had been there way longer. So usually the person who's been there longer is the ring general, but I know a lot of times they do prefer heels to call matches, but you can hear Test talking throughout the match every once in a while, a few things like, you know, like block my punch, things like that. It wasn't that distracting, but you could hear it. The worst thing of the whole match, there is a spot where Test has a submission on Edge. I don't remember if it was like a rear naked choke or something, whatever. He has it on, and the referee's doing the whole like lifting Edge's hand up, and he gets to 2, and when Edge's hand dropped, now Edge is supposed to be like near passed out. The idea is that, you know, blood is no longer rushing to his brain, so he's getting dizzy, he's gonna pass out. So the spot is, of course, classic wrestling. The referee would grab his hand and he'd drop it and be like, oh no. Well, what happened was when he dropped Edge's hand the second time, Edge's other hand, you see, is off the mat and he's like holding it. Well, Edge fucked up just a little bit, because the spot ended with the referee holds Edge's hand up, drops it, and then Edge brings his other hand up and catches it and stops, which is kind of stupid. I don't really understand how that would work. But Edge basically blew it. He started to bring his arm up for the second drop instead of the third. I mean, that's it though. That is the minor nitpicks that I noticed while watching this thing again. They had some really cool fucking counters. My two favorites, they had a pump handle slam attempt Test onto Edge, and when Test put Edge over for the slam, Edge fell back and grabbed him. I can't remember what he called this move, but he would grab the front of Test's face and throw him back onto his back, and Edge sits down. That was amazing. I remember that we stole that when we did Backyard Wrestling because it was that cool. I did really enjoy that Test just randomly used Edge's spear with no repercussions, because at this point, I think Test's finisher was the pump handle slam or the big boot, one or the other. But you didn't see Edge go for those at all. It was refreshing, because nowadays wrestling logic is I use your finisher, I use one of your moves, because the spear wasn't actually Edge's finisher. It was a inverted DDT thing. But Edge did beat people with the spear sometimes. But it was refreshing to see the heel, who's obviously a cocky asshole piece of shit, use the babyface's move just out of nowhere. And it makes sense too, because Test is way bigger than Edge, so it's going to have more impact, and just no repercussions from the babyface. He stuck to his game. He didn't try to do something else. It almost makes sense from a match standpoint too, because Test, halfway through the match, you can tell Test is starting to become pretty desperate, because Edge is countering a lot of his stuff. He's one step ahead of him. And so Test goes, well, then I'm going to hit you with one of your moves and see what happens. All right, Edge didn't try to use a move on Test that he's not good at, or he hasn't practiced or whatever. In kayfabe terms, he stuck to his plan, and that's what won. But it was nice. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I want to see that more. It would make sense that if someone's getting desperate, maybe they're going to try something different and try to steal one of the moves of the opponent they're wrestling in the match. But that leads us to the finish, which I think is excellent. We had a series of counters. They're going for clotheslines, ducking each other's shit. But basically, Test tries to catch Edge into a full Nelson slam. When he lifts him up, Edge just barely rolls through and hits him with a cradle or victory roll, and he gets the pin. And I remember being pretty surprised about that, because I think when we were watching that, I think all our friends thought that Test was going to win this one. I just felt like that was the case. Now, the build-up to this was kind of shit. I can't remember exactly because it's so long ago and I didn't really look it up, but I do remember they like hot-shotted both the titles onto Test and Edge to make this match happen. And I mean, hindsight, who cares, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't be as hard on them about that, but this match is really fun. Overall, I enjoyed both these guys working together. I think this is easily, hands down, Test's best match of his entire career. Obviously not the case for Edge. Edge has had far better matches since then, but this was Edge's coming out party. So, great match, yes. I do think that it held up to, from what I remember, I think it is still the best Alliance match that they ever put on TV. And that's not saying much, but but it's a really good match. Yes, I do think it held up overall. But I want to know if you guys remember this match. What were your thoughts on Edge versus Test unifying the United States Intercontinental titles at Survivor Series 2001? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for supporting the Jobber Radio channel. More of these to come. We'll see you next time.